but I can choose to be the happiest and most grateful I've ever been while I endure the most difficult time in my life. And I did. And because of that, I believe I'm alive today. Because of that, I believe I took my first step within 3 weeks after doctors said I never would. And I broke 11 bones, including my femur broke in 2 separate pieces and my pelvis broke in 3 places. So this superpower has gotten me through the mental, emotional, physical, and even later financial challenges of my life. The shadow side is emotional suppression.
I am kind of curious about your family and your parents and, kind of how they were in shaping you as a young child.
Here's a very a turning point in the life of our family.
Okay.
When I was 7 years old, so I had a 5-year-old sister, Haley. She was a year and a half younger than me. And my mom had a baby, Amory. Amory was born with a very rare heart condition to the point where they detected her condition early on, and they told my mother to have an abortion. They said, your daughter will probably not make it through the pregnancy, and if she lives through the pregnancy, she won't live much longer. And my mom said, I'll let God decide that. Not, we're gonna see what, I'm not gonna have an abortion. And so my sister's born with metropic dysplasia. I think I might be mispronouncing that, but something like that's a very rare condition. There were like 6,000 people alive in the United States with that condition. My sister was born. Part of it, it's actually a form of dwarfism. So she never would have been like 4 feet tall, I think was the tallest she would have ever been. She had a very curved spine. It was noticeably curved. And she basically lived in and out of the hospital. My mom and dad had to constantly take her for treatments. And she looked different. So some of the kids at school made fun of her. And, I dealt with that. I was in probably 2nd or 3rd grade at this time. Well, a year and a half into her life, I was at home. It was a Saturday morning. It was me, my mom, and my youngest sister, Amory. My dad was at work at the Pines Market, the grocery store he worked at the time. And my other sister, Haley, was at my grandmother's house, 3 hours away. And I woke up to the sound of my mother screaming, my baby, my baby, my baby. And I literally remember coming to kind of groggy. And I remember my first thought was, oh, my mom's playing with Amory, my baby, my baby, my baby. And but as I started to become more awake, I sensed horror in my mom's voice. And so I ran across the hall to my mom's bedroom, and she was performing mouth-to-mouth CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on my sister. And I stood like a deer in headlights in the door, just, trying to, at 8 years old, trying to process what I was seeing. And my mom's out of breath, and she said, Hal, call 911. So I grabbed the phone, call 911, tell the police to come. And then she said, go tell Grant, our neighbor, our 80-year-old neighbor, 80, maybe even 82, whatever. He was in his 80s. He had an oxygen tank, a very large, 5-foot tall oxygen tank that he always was hooked up to, and he carried it with him. Now, we lived in the mountains, so there was no sidewalk between the houses. It was like up hills, down hills, right? We were on a couple acres. And so I run across to Grant and I say, Grant, my sister's not breathing. We need your oxygen tank. And so, poor Grant, he's 80 something years old, and he's shuffling across my yard, which has sticks and pine cones. And, so, it probably took him, 10 minutes to get back with his oxygen to my mom. And I don't remember if it was him or my mom, but we put it over Amory's face, and the air, it was too big for her face. It just blew out the sides of her cheeks. My dad shows up, ambulance shows up. My friend Ben, his mother shows up. My dad had called and said, hey, will you take Hal to your house? And so I went to her house and played with Ben. And in my mind, I'm thinking, the ambulance is going to save my sister. That's what they do. She's going to the hospital. They save people there, right? So I had not a second thought over what was happening. I'm just like, oh yeah, my sister's not breathing, but it's okay. The people came to save her. And a couple hours later, Janine, my friend's mom, comes out and says, your dad's on the phone. And she looks I remember she's very somber. And I went in, and my dad's crying. And I never heard my dad cry. And he says, Amory's in heaven. And, I don't fully remember, Brett, what I was thinking, but I know what I said first. Not to my dad, but I think to my dad, I said, wait, she's dead, and my dad said yes. And my brain, I think, is trying to process this, what it means. And I go out in the living room and I said, hey guys, I said, guess where Amory is, in a really positive, upbeat voice. And I remember I can see Ben's mom's face. Like she tilts her head and furrows her brow. And I just see this look of like sadness. And I said, guess where Amory is? And Ben said, where? I said, she's in heaven. Isn't that great? Heaven's like the best place ever from what I've heard. And so doing some of my own psychological work and reflection, I think that at that moment, my 8-year-old self didn't understand the emotions that were coming up. And I think that I didn't know how to handle them or process them. And somehow a switch flipped in my brain. And I went, well, wait, if I look at the positive side of this and I make light of it, I don't have to feel the things I was feeling. And there's a couple things I want to wrap this up before I turn it back to you. Number one is how I responded and what that meant for the rest of my life. And then how my parents responded and what that meant for our family's life and my life. So number one, I've identified that in that moment, I think I developed a superpower, and we all have superpowers. And almost every superpower, or maybe every superpower, has a shadow side, right? Has a dark side. My superpower was I became able to handle any painful circumstance that ever came my way. When I was 20, I was hit head on by a drunk driver, found dead at the scene, broke 11 bones, came out of a coma 7 days later to be told I would never walk again. And I was so positive about it. I was genuinely happy and at peace that the doctors thought I was in denial or delusional, but it was very real. It's the way that I process. I go, look, I can't change that I was in a car accident, that I broke 11 bones, that I have permanent brain damage, that I might be in a wheelchair the rest of my life, but I can choose to focus on what I'm grateful for, to focus on what I still have in my life, to focus on what makes me happy. It's not delusional. Those things are real. I'm just accepting the things I can't change. That was the superpower. When I had cancer, the day I was diagnosed with cancer and given a 20% chance of surviving, I was 37 years old at the time. I have a 7-year-old daughter at the time, 4-year-old son. And it was the scariest thing in my life that I was being told I was most likely going to die and leave my family, my kids, without a dad. Nothing was worse than that to me, but I couldn't change the circumstance I was in. So my superpower was I'm going to accept what's out of my control, like that I can't go and change. I can't change that I have cancer, but I can choose to be the happiest and most grateful I've ever been while I endure the most difficult time in my life. And I did. And because of that, I believe I'm alive today. Because of that, I believe I took my first step within 3 weeks after doctors said I never would. And I broke 11 bones, including my femur broke in 2 separate pieces and my pelvis broke in 3 places. So this superpower has gotten me through the mental, emotional, physical, and even later financial challenges of my life. The shadow side is emotional suppression. It's a lack of empathy. I never developed empathy in my life because I never experienced emotional pain and I didn't understand what that was like. So when I got married or any relationships, and my wife or even girlfriends throughout the years are like, I'm really struggling with this. It's really hard. I go, just accept it and move on. Just focus on the positive. So it really made my relationships challenging. And I could only help people to a point because I didn't understand what it was like to be them going through these difficult emotions. That all changed for me in 2020. After 3 years of chemo, I went through chronic sleep deprivation. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I became suicidal, and we could go back to that if we want, but I'm just mentioning that because that period was when I was so depressed and had so much anxiety that I wanted to kill myself for 6 months, literally. And I got therapy. I did everything that I could. And as I went through it, at one point I realized, oh, I'm going through this so that I can experience the most difficult mental and emotional trauma so that I can now develop the empathy and understanding of what people go through when they're at such a low point that they want to die, that they don't want to live anymore, so that I can help more people. Before I didn't understand what it felt like to be that low. Now that I do, it's my responsibility to figure it out, to get over it, to get through it, so that I can help the other millions and tens of millions of people that are themselves suffering from extreme mental health issues, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and on and on. So that's the superpower. And the last thing I want to share, and I know it's a long answer, I'll turn it back over to you.
No, it's okay.
My parents set the example for my work that I do now. My mom lost a baby. As a parent, I can't even imagine. I could imagine, but even imagining, I don't want to imagine it, right? It's like, to me, if you're a parent, it's the worst thing that could happen. Within 6 months, rather than giving up she went through her grieving. Within 6 months, she founded a support group for other parents who had lost children so that she could turn her pain into purpose and help other people through what they were going through. That's where I learned to do that with everything that I've gone through, my car accident, my cancer, my financial collapse, everything else. My book, The Miracle Morning, was born out of the 2008 financial collapse because I got through it with this morning ritual. I started teaching it to other people. They used it to transform their lives. And I went, well, wait a minute. If it changed my life, The Miracle Morning changed my life, and I wasn't a morning person. The Miracle Morning changed all my clients' lives, and they weren't morning people. Most of them were not. It could change anyone's life if I share it. I have a responsibility to share it. And my dad was raising money, leading fundraisers for the hospital that tried to save my sister's life. I want you to hear that, everyone. He didn't blame the hospital because they failed at saving my sister's life. He raised money to support the work because they tried. So my mom and dad turned their pain into purpose. And to me, I believe that for all of us, we have a responsibility to overcome our challenges, fulfill our potential in service of those we love and those we lead so that we can help them to do the same.
Thank you for that. I feel like I just want to take a moment to be with you and all of that, because I don't want to jump too quick to what you're doing and how it's served you, so that you can serve others. It's tempting to do that because I share that belief and believe my life and all of ours. It's really the reason I do this podcast, is designed in that way. But I see you choke back the tears. I see you push through. And I just want to take a second and acknowledge that those are really traumatic, really hard, really full life experiences, that you have just shared, and I think sometimes, as you described, to some degree, it's amazingly powerful and probably saved your life more than once, to have the gift of being able to see the positive, to being able to have the strength to focus on the future and the go forward and the outcomes you want to create. But I do believe in my own experience personally that, it's sometimes referred to as spiritual bypass, where
yes,
you skip over the pain and the emotion. And then, it can get stuck and land in the body and have all kinds of others. In your case, you described how it was affecting your relationships, and
it may have been what caused my cancer, by the way, just to echo what you're saying.
Yeah. And, look, I mean, that's part of it too, right? That's part of it too, that so maybe you have to learn, that you can't do that, But I just want to acknowledge because sometimes I think it's that simple. I think it's a very fine line. I mean, you can hang out in it too long too,
sure,
right?
Sure.
Because the truth is also, it's sort of up to you to decide, right? And I think it's more of an energetic thing. It's more of a feeling than it is an intellectual thing. That I got to feel this. And then at a certain point, I do need to move on. I do need to, right? So anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge it. And I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And I appreciate the emotion as much as the content.